Why was she the only one who stayed silent at the table? The briefing room hummed with low voices, the scrape of chairs, the metallic tick of a clock on the wall, but she hadn't said a word. Her hands rested flat against the folder in front of her, eyes lowered as if the pages could answer questions no one dared ask. They noticed her silence. They always did. Some mistook it for weakness. Others thought it was arrogance, but the truth was heavier than either. Because silence was the only place she could cry, and tonight no one would see her cry. The officer at the head of the table droned on about the mission coordinates, the satellite images, the timeline. His words blurred into patterns she already knew by heart. She had read the file 3 times in her bunk the night before, memorized every contour line on the map, every red-marked zone. None of them knew she hadn't slept. None of them knew her pillow was damp when she folded it under her head. She didn't look at them. She couldn't. The team was small, 8 men and her, each one watching, testing, waiting for a slip. She had earned her place, yet still, every mission began the same way, a quiet reminder that she was not like them. Not in body, not in past, not in the unspoken codes of brotherhood. Her name wasn't whispered in the room. They used call signs, nicknames thrown like badges, but hers was different. The men called her Ghost, not because she moved quietly, not because she was invisible in the field, but because they couldn't figure out who she really was when the rifles were down, when the helmets came off. And maybe they were right. She listened to them laugh, trading stories in rough voices, childhood scraps, broken marriages, scars they wore like medals. She had none to share. Or maybe she had too many, buried in silence so deep they had no shape left to describe. She sipped from the steel cup of black coffee in front of her and let it burn her throat. A reminder, a tether. She wasn't here for them to understand her. The commander's voice sharpened. The village sits here. He pointed at the map projected on the wall, finger tracing a cluster of mud brick rooftops along a river. Satellite confirms movement in and out. High-value package may be inside. Intercept window is tight. Package, she hated that word. Packages didn't bleed. Packages didn't beg for mercy. But in this world, language softened brutality. It kept the edges dull enough to grip without cutting skin. She closed her eyes. For just a second, her mind betrayed her. The village wasn't just coordinates. She had seen places like it before. Dust swirling in the wind, children with eyes too wide for their small faces, women clutching bread as though it might vanish. She had been one of them once. She remembered, though she never told anyone, that the first sound she could recall wasn't laughter or lullabies. It was gunfire echoing through walls. Her throat tightened. She forced her focus back. The commander looked around the room. Any questions? A pause, boots scraped. A cough. No one spoke. She felt their eyes flicker toward her just for a heartbeat, waiting. She gave them nothing. When the meeting dissolved, they filed out, the scrape of chairs mixing with the murmur of jokes, the tap of lighters flicking cigarettes alive. She stayed behind a moment longer. Alone, the silence pressed against her like a weight. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, palms pressed to her eyes, for one breath, two. Then she straightened, mask pulled back into place, and followed them out. The night air bit sharp. The base was quiet, towers silhouetted against a half-moon sky, the faint smell of oil and dust carried on the wind. She walked toward the barracks, boots thudding softly against packed earth. And with each step the question gnawed. Why had they chosen her for this mission? Not officially, on paper, she was qualified. More than qualified. Top scores, unshaken under pressure, a marksman's calm. But she knew there was another reason. One none of them would admit. Because she could disappear. If the mission failed, if the line between success and disaster blurred, she was the expendable one. The ghost. Her bunk was neat, folded blanket, boots lined square. She sat down heavily and unzipped the small pouch tucked beneath the mattress. Inside was a single photograph, edges frayed from years of handling. A girl with braids, a boy laughing beside her, a mother's arm stretched around them both. She traced the image with her finger. The boy had been 12 when the blast took him. The mother, gone before dawn in a raid no one claimed responsibility for. She had been 16, old enough to remember, young enough that the memory had carved her into something unrecognizable. She placed the photo back, zipped it shut, and lay down. The ceiling was plain, painted steel. She stared until her eyes blurred. Sleep never came easy, and when it did, it was full of shadows. The next morning, the team moved with mechanical rhythm. Weapons checked, gear strapped, radio codes murmured. She pulled on her vest, fingers steady, movements rehearsed to perfection. Her rifle rested across her knees as the truck rattled forward, headlights cutting through darkness. The men joked, loud voices filling the space. She kept her gaze fixed outside. The horizon bled faint light. The sun rose slow, painting the desert in pale gold. Her heart beat steady but heavy, like a drum in the hollow of her chest. She thought of what lay ahead. The village, the mission, the package, but beneath it all something deeper gnawed at her. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The truck jolted to a stop. Engines killed. Silence rushed in. They moved out, boots crunching gravel, weapons raised. The air smelled of dust and smoke, faint wood fires burning in the distance. A dog barked far off, then silence again. She took her position. High ground. Her rifle nestled into her shoulder, cheek pressed firm, eye steady through the scope. The village lay below, narrow alleys, mud walls, shadows shifting with first light. Her breath slowed. She could hear her heartbeat, steady, almost calm. Through the scope, a window flickered with movement. A man, armed, another followed. She whispered coordinates into the radio, her voice low, controlled. The team shifted, moving closer. The mission unfolded like a script, every move calculated. But beneath the control, the silence grew louder. The memory of her own village, the cries, the ash, the question that never left. Was she saving anyone today, or was she only repeating history under a different flag? Her finger hovered near the trigger. The man stepped into view again. For a breath, his face caught the light. He wasn't older than 20. Her chest tightened. The image of her brother flashed behind her eyes. 12 years old, laughing in a photo. 12 years old, broken in the rubble. She blinked hard, pressed the memory back. Her job was not to remember. Her job was to erase. The radio crackled. A voice barked, target confirmed, engage. Her hand steadied. The rifle whispered back with a single shot. The man fell. The silence afterward was deafening. And though no one around her saw it, in that silence she cried. Not tears down her face, but inside where no one could reach. The cry of a ghost. But she wiped it away before it reached her eyes. No one would ever know. What they didn't see, what they couldn't, was that every silence of hers was louder than the gunfire, louder than the orders, louder than their trust or their doubt. And though they couldn't hear it yet, her silence would soon become the loudest proof of her resolve. What made her keep looking at the boy's face even after he was gone? Through the scope, his body had crumpled into the dust, rifle sliding from his grasp, a shadow swallowed by morning light. She should have shifted her aim, scanned for the next threat, moved on. That's what training demanded. That's what survival required. But her eyes lingered too long, and in that pause, something inside her cracked. The radio hissed in her ear, urgent voices moving the team forward, their boots pounding toward the alleys below. She blinked hard, adjusted her breathing, pulled her focus back. But still, the echo of his youth clung to her chest. She knew this was dangerous. Not the boy, not the mission, but the memory that wouldn't release her. Her finger brushed the cold metal of the trigger guard as if grounding herself. The village was alive now. Doors opening, figures moving, some armed, some not. Children darting into shadows, women dragging blankets across doorways, smoke curling upward where stoves were lit. The rhythm of life carried on, interrupted only by the team's presence, ghosts of another kind moving alley to alley, weapons raised. She whispered coordinates, movement on rooftops, a figure slipping between walls, her voice steady, clipped, professional. But inside, a question repeated. What had he carried besides the rifle? A dream? A fear? a face he loved waiting for him inside one of those doorways. The team pushed deeper. She shifted position, eyes sweeping the rooftops. Wind tugged lightly at her scarf, grit brushing across her lips. She tasted dust and something sharper like iron, a reminder of what she'd swallowed all her life. Static crackled, a shout in the radio, contact, left side near the river. Gunfire split the silence, sharp echoing, relentless. She swung the scope, caught sight of muzzle flashes, bodies shifting. Her heart slammed once, then steadied into its practiced rhythm. Breathe, exhale, fire. Two shapes collapsed. Another darted into cover. Her team's voices roared in her earpiece, urgent, overlapping, fierce. She heard one of them curse, another groan. She tightened her grip. The fight wasn't chaos to her. It was a rhythm she had memorized long before she wore the uniform. She squeezed, fired, shifted, fired again. The dance of death, practiced in silence. Then a break, quiet except for the ringing in her ears. She scanned again. Smoke drifted above rooftops. A dog barked once, then stopped. The team regrouped near the square, their outlines framed against the mud walls. And then she saw her. A girl, no older than 10, clutching the limp body of the boy she had shot. The rifle was gone, kicked away by someone in the scramble. But the girl didn't see any of that. She only saw the stillness of her brother's face. The female soldier's breath caught, throat locking. Her finger trembled against the trigger. The girl's cries didn't carry through the radio, but she didn't need sound. The sight alone was enough. Thin shoulders shaking, bare feet in the dust, hair tangled, falling into her eyes. A soundless scream that reached across the distance, across years, across memory. She lowered her rifle, pulled back from the scope. For the first time in years, her hands shook. The mission wasn't over. The commander barked orders into the comms, pushing them forward, tightening the perimeter. But his voice was far away now, drowned under the weight of a silence that pressed against her chest like stone. Because she had seen herself in that girl, 10 years old, kneeling in rubble, cradling someone who should have lived, her brother. Her lungs burned. She forced her eyes shut. The memory surged, dust, smoke, screams, the heat of fire licking broken walls, her brother's voice fatting under the roar of guns. She had held him just like that girl now held her brother, and no one had stopped to notice. No one had cared. Soldiers moved past her as if she were invisible, ghost already. She dragged herself back into the present with effort. Her duty was clear: protect the team, cover the advance, report movements. But part of her, some fragile hidden part, had cracked open in that moment, and she wasn't sure how to seal it again. The team pushed forward. She scanned rooftops, forced her breath steady, eyes hard. She couldn't afford distraction. Not now. Not here. But when the girl's small figure finally disappeared into a doorway, her cries still rang in the soldier's mind, louder than gunfire, louder than orders. By the time the squad reached their objective, a mud-walled compound at the village's edge, the air was thick with dust and silence. The gate creaked under a boot, hinges snapping. They stormed inside, shouts, boots pounding stairs, doors kicked in. She stayed on the ridge, scope sweeping, watching for movement. Minutes stretched long. Sweat trickled down her temple. Her muscles ached with the stillness of her position. Then the radio clicked alive. Package secured. Extract in 5. Her jaw tightened. Package, again that word. She shifted the scope, caught sight of 2 men dragging another out of the building. The high-value target, a middle-aged man, face bruised, hands bound. He stumbled, eyes wide with fury or fear. She couldn't tell which. They hauled him toward the vehicles. Mission success. Clean, efficient, by every measure perfect. So why did her chest feel hollow? The vehicles rumbled back across the barren land, engines growling, dust trailing. She sat in silence, rifle across her lap, eyes on the horizon. The men laughed again, relief spilling out in bursts of crude jokes and tired grins. No one mentioned the boy. No one mentioned the girl. She did not laugh, she did not speak. Hours later, back at base, the debrief was short. The commander praised efficiency, commended precision. They nodded, satisfied, another line checked, another mission complete. But when the room emptied, she stayed behind again, alone in silence. Her hands pressed against the table, knuckles white. She let her head fall forward, eyes closed, the weight of it all pressing down until she thought she might break. Only then did the tears slip free. Quiet, hidden, absorbed into her sleeve before anyone could see. Because she cried only when alone. And still, the silence that followed was louder than anything they would ever hear. She lay awake that night, the photo clutched against her chest, her brother's smile, her mother's hand. A life burned away, replaced by this endless cycle of missions and ghosts. She told herself she fought for them. She told herself every bullet was justice. But tonight, doubt seeped in through the cracks. What if she wasn't saving anyone? What if she was only rewriting her own tragedy onto someone else's child? She closed her eyes, heart heavy. And though no answer came, she knew one thing with certainty. Her silence, her refusal to speak the questions aloud, wasn't weakness. It was the only way she could keep moving forward. And yet, deep inside, she feared the day her silence would no longer hold. Because what would happen when the ghost finally spoke? Why did they look at her differently the next morning? The barracks was alive with the rustle of gear, the scrape of boots, the hiss of zippers pulled shut. Laughter carried across the room, voices sharp with after-mission adrenaline still burning in their blood. But when her eyes lifted, she caught it, that subtle shift. Glances that lingered a moment too long. A silence that followed her steps like a shadow. Had someone seen her pause yesterday? Had they noticed the way her rifle lowered for just a second too long? She replayed the mission in her mind, every movement, every breath. On paper, it was perfect. A clean record, precision, success. But the battlefield had no paper. It had memory, and memory was dangerous. She tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, hands steady though her chest felt tight. The mirror across the room reflected a face she sometimes didn't recognize, skin hardened by sun, eyes that seemed older than her years. Ghost. They called her that because she kept her past hidden. But what if they knew her silence wasn't strength? What if they knew it was the only thing keeping her from breaking? Outside, the desert air pressed against her lungs, sharp with morning chill. The base stirred awake, vehicles idling, radios crackling, flags flapping faintly in the wind. She walked to the mess hall, the weight of her rifle slung over her shoulder, as natural to her body as breath. Inside, the men clustered around tables, trays cluttered with eggs and bread, tin mugs steaming. Their voices filled the room in waves, but when she entered, the sound dimmed just slightly. She caught it again, that pause, that glance. And then one of them broke the tension with a loud laugh, slapping another on the back, the moment erased. Almost. She sat at the edge of a table, alone but near enough to hear. The men talked about the mission, about the package they'd secured, about the chase through narrow alleys. They spoke of it as if it were a game, a test passed, a story to boast. None mentioned the boy. None mentioned the girl. She tore her bread into small pieces, chewing slowly, her eyes fixed on the table. One of them, Ray's, broad-shouldered, with a scar running along his jaw, leaned back in his chair, voice louder than the rest. Clean shot yesterday. Could have gone sideways, but Ghost here. He tilted his head toward her. Ghost doesn't miss. The table murmured agreement. A nod, a smirk, a raised mug, compliment wrapped in suspicion. She forced a small nod in return but didn't speak. Her silence filled the space again, pressing in, reshaping the mood. Rays watched her a second longer, as if searching for something in her face, then turned back to his food. She finished quickly and left before they could ask questions. She wouldn't answer. The day dragged on with drills, reports, the endless grind of preparation. She cleaned her rifle twice, though it didn't need it. She checked her gear, rechecked it, folded and refolded her pack. The routine steadied her, gave her something to hold when her mind wanted to drift back to the girl's cries. But routine couldn't stop memory. That night, lying in her bunk, she closed her eyes and it came again. The boy's face, young, caught in the light. The girl's arms around him, and behind it all the rubble of her own childhood. Her brother's laugh cut short, her mother's hand slipping away, the silence afterward heavier than any explosion. She turned onto her side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her throat ached with the cry she wouldn't release. Not here, not where others could hear. She pressed her face into the pillow, and in that darkness the tears came quietly unseen. Morning rose again as it always did. Orders followed. Another mission, another village, another set of coordinates pinned to a map. This time the tension in the room was different. The commander's voice was clipped, urgent. Intel suggests a stockpile hidden here, not just small arms. We're talking crates, enough to arm a militia twice the size of this region's population. We go in clean, sweep, secure. The men nodded. Excitement hummed in the air, bigger mission, higher stakes. She sat silent, hands folded, eyes scanning the map. Her stomach churned. Because this village, she knew it. The lines on the map, the bend of the river, the shape of the hills surrounding it. She hadn't seen it in years, but memory filled in the gaps. It wasn't her village, but it was close, too close. Her hands curled into fists against the table. If she spoke now, if she said what she knew, they'd ask why. They'd ask how. And then the truth she had hidden would bleed out piece by piece until she was no longer a ghost but a liability. So she said nothing. But silence came at a cost. The trucks rattled over dirt roads, suspension groaning, the desert stretching endless around them. She sat wedged between two men, their voices rumbling over the engine noise. Her eyes fixed outside, where the horizon shimmered with heat. Every bump jolted her chest, but it wasn't the road. It was the pull of memory, dragging her backward. Her brother had wanted to be a teacher. He used to scribble letters in the dirt, teaching her how to sound them out, even when shells screamed in the distance. "One day," he'd said, voice bright, "we'll build a school, a real one, with books, with desks, you'll see." She had believed him, until the day the blast tore him away, and all that was left was rubble. The truck jolted again, pulling her back to the present. The men laughed at some crude joke, their words muffled by her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She tightened her grip on her rifle. When they reached the village, the sun hung high, light bouncing off pale walls. The air was thick with heat, the kind that clung to skin, heavy and unrelenting. The team fanned out, weapons raised, moving through narrow streets. She took position again, climbing to high ground, scope sweeping. From above, the village looked almost peaceful. Children ran across rooftops. Women carried water jars. Life, fragile and ordinary beneath the shadow of war. Her scope lingered on a face, an old man sitting outside his doorway, hands folded in his lap. His eyes, weary, seemed to look straight at her, though he couldn't see her through the glass. For a second she thought he knew what she carried, knew what she had lost. The radio crackled, the search began. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. No sign of weapons, no hidden stockpiles, just families starring with fear and confusion as soldiers tore through their homes. She relayed coordinates, covered blind spots, her voice flat, controlled. But inside a storm raged. Because she knew this place, not just from maps, from footsteps she had taken as a child before the world burned. She remembered the river bend where she used to skip stones. She remembered the hill where she had once watched the sunset with her brother. And now, here she was, rifle aimed at rooftops, hunting shadows in a place that had once felt safe. Safe, the word almost made her laugh. There had never been safety. Not then, not now, not ever. By dusk, the team regrouped, frustration sharp in their voices. "Nothing," one muttered. "Waste of intel." But the commander wasn't satisfied. His eyes hard, his tone sharp. "We keep digging. We don't leave empty-handed." She felt it then, the weight of something darker. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was hunger. Proof demanded, whether it existed or not. Her stomach knotted. She looked again through her scope, at the children now huddled inside doorways, at the old man still sitting outside his home. And the question burned in her chest. How many ghosts would this place make tonight? She swallowed hard, said nothing. Silence was her shield, but inside the cracks widened. And she knew sooner or later silence would break. Why did the commander's eyes linger on her when he ordered them to stay longer? The others grumbled under their breath, shifting their gear, scraping boots against the dirt floor of the commandeered building they now used as a temporary post. But his stare, sharp, searching, rested on her as if daring her to question him. She didn't. She never did. Her silence was both her shield and her prison. Outside, the village was wrapped in the orange glow of dusk. Shadows stretched long across narrow alleys. A faint breeze carried the smell of bread and smoke, mingled with something heavier, fear. She sat by the window, rifle across her lap, scanning the rooftops. The men moved restlessly inside, muttering, checking gear, lighting cigarettes. Tension hummed like static in the air. She could feel it in her chest too. Not just the tension of the mission, but the tension of memory. This place wasn't hers, but it was close enough. Close enough to stir ghosts she had buried deep. Reyes broke the silence first. "We shouldn't be here," he muttered, dragging on a cigarette. "Intel's garbage. We've kicked in half the doors in this place, found nothing but broken furniture and scared kids." Another soldier, Miller, younger, eager, snorted. "Maybe you're just tired. There's something here. Always is." Reyes shot him a look. "You think crates of weapons just magically hide themselves?" The commander cut in sharply. "Enough." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on her again. "We'll hold until morning, then sweep again." Groans, mutters. No one argued outright. Orders were orders. She kept her eyes outside, but her ears caught everything. Reyes, Miller, the others, they had their doubts, their frustrations. But she couldn't afford either. Not allowed. Not where it could be used against her. The night deepened. Stars pricked the sky above, pale and distant. The village grew quiet, doors closed, lamps extinguished one by one. She sat still, listening to the hum of insects, the faint bark of a dog, the shift of sand in the wind. Every sound pressed sharper against her senses. When her relief finally came, she lay down on her mat in the corner, rifle still within arm's reach. The men snored, restless, their breaths uneven in the close air. But sleep didn't come for her. Not easily. Not here. Her eyes drifted shut only to reopen at the sound of footsteps outside. Soft, bare. She froze, listening. A pause, then another step. She shifted silently, crawling to the window, peering into the alley below. A figure moved in the shadows. Small, thin, she squinted, a child. The girl. The same one who had clutched her brother's body yesterday. Her heart stopped. The girl's eyes scanned the alley, wide, glinting in faint moonlight. She carried nothing, just herself, fragile and trembling. For a moment their gazes met across the distance, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, grief, accusation. The soldier's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to whisper something, anything, that might bridge the impossible chasm between them. But her voice locked. And then the girl vanished into the shadows, slipping between doorways like smoke. She sat back, chest heaving, hands trembling against her knees. No one else had seen. No one else would know. But she knew. Sleep was impossible after that. By dawn, the team moved again, sweeping the village with renewed aggression. Doors banged. Voices shouted. Families cowered. Her role stayed the same, eyes from above, scope sweeping, voice calm in the radio. But her thoughts weren't calm. Because with every cry, every frightened face, she felt the distance between herself and the girl shrinking. At midday, Reyes climbed up to her post, wiping sweat from his brow. "You ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" he asked quietly, settling against the wall. His tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't sharp. It was human. She stiffened. He never spoke to her like this. He exhaled, staring at the horizon. Been at this too long. Every time I close my eyes, I see faces, not the ones we save, the ones we leave behind, the ones who don't make it." His jaw flexed. "Feels like they stack up faster than I can count." She swallowed hard, throat dry. She wanted to say she understood, that she saw them too, that the ghosts never left, but silence bound her, so she only nodded, eyes fixed through her scope. Reyes gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, ghost figures you'd keep quiet." He stood, adjusting his gear. "Keep watch." When he left, her chest ached with the words she hadn't spoken. By evening, the commander's frustration boiled over. Still no weapons. Still no proof. His voice snapped like a whip as he ordered another sweep, this time deeper into the outskirts. The men grumbled, weary, but obeyed. She followed, covering them from above. The alleys narrowed, twisting into paths that felt more like traps. She scanned every shadow, every rooftop, nerves coiled tight. Then movement, not a soldier, not a fighter. Children, a cluster of them huddled near a collapsed wall, eyes wide. She whispered coordinates, voice low. "Non-combatants, east corner." The commander's voice snapped back. "Ignore, keep moving." Her stomach clenched. Ignore, as if lives could be brushed aside like dust. She watched the children scatter into shadows, her scope tracking them until they vanished. Her finger twitched against the trigger guard, useless, helpless. The sweep turned up nothing again. No crates, no weapons, no proof. By the time the sun dipped low, the men were angry, tired, restless. And then it happened. A single shot cracked through the air. A bullet slammed into the wall inches from her head. She dropped, rolled, pressed against cover. Radio crackled with shouts. Ambush. Figures erupted from rooftops, from alleys, armed, fast, relentless. Gunfire tore the silence apart. Dust exploded around them, screams mixing with the roar of rifles. She pressed back into position, scope locking onto shapes in the chaos. Her breath slowed, fingers squeezed, shot after shot cutting through the storm. Bodies fell. The team scrambled for cover, voices overlapping in panic. Then she heard it, a groan. Reyes hit. Her chest seized. She swung her scope, found him slumped against a wall, blood spreading dark across his vest. His rifle lay just out of reach. Enemies moved closer, shadows tightening around him. Her pulse thundered. She steadied, fired. One fell, another ducked. She whispered his name under her breath, though the radio carried nothing but chaos. Her finger worked the trigger, breath sinking with each shot. Finally, the pressure broke. The attackers scattered, fading into alleys as quickly as they'd come. Silence fell heavy, broken only by groans, gasps, the clatter of weapons hitting stone. She scrambled down from her post, boots pounding, rifle clutched. Reyes lay pale, blood slick on his side. She dropped to her knees, pressing her hand against the wound. His eyes flickered open, meeting hers. His voice was rough, weak. "Don't cry, not here." Her throat closed. She pressed harder, though the blood kept seeping. "You're the ghost," he whispered. "Stay that way." Then his eyes slipped shut. She froze, breath locked, hand trembling against the warmth of his blood. The others rushed around her, medics, voices sharp, urgent. But in her ears his words echoed. "Don't cry." And she didn't, not there, not then. She pressed her lips together, swallowed the sob clawing its way up her chest, and let the silence swallow her whole. But inside she screamed. The medic's hands were soaked red, pressing hard against Reyes' wound. The commander barked orders into the radio, voice clipped, controlled, but his eyes betrayed urgency. The other men set up a perimeter, rifles aimed outward, scanning rooftops and alleys for the next wave. She knelt frozen beside Reyes. His face was pale, slack, but his chest still rose faintly under the medic's pressure. Every second stretched, suspended between hope and inevitability. The commander's gaze snapped to her. "Ghost, get back on overwatch, now." She hesitated, blood sticky on her hands. She wanted to stay, to press down harder, to hold Reyes' life in place. But orders were orders. Her silence, her shield, forced her compliance. She wiped her trembling hands on her trousers, stood, and climbed back to her vantage point. From above, the village looked unchanged, silent, fragile. But for her, nothing was the same. She sighted down her scope, but her eyes blurred. All she saw was Ray's face, his whispered words, "Don't cry, not here." Her finger brushed the trigger. Empty ritual. Her focus cracked, fractured, scattered into pieces she couldn't gather. The medevac came at dusk. The helicopter thundered in low, dust blasting through the alleys. The team rushed Ray's onto the stretcher, strapped him down, lifted him aboard. His face disappeared into the shadows of the cabin. And then he was gone. The dust settled. Silence swallowed the streets again. The commander faced the men. "We regroup. We move out at dawn. We finish the sweep." The soldiers groaned, restless, muttering darkly. They were tired, angry, shaken, and they were down one of their own. That night she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling beams above her mat. Sleep wouldn't come. Every blink replayed the ambush, the blood, Ray's voice. She pressed her palms against her ears as if she could force silence into her head, but the ghosts never obeyed. A sound broke through, a faint scrape outside. She froze, hands slipping toward her rifle. She rose silently, moved to the window, peered out. The girl again. This time closer. Standing in the alley, small hands clenched into fists, chin lifted in defiance. Her eyes locked on the soldier, unblinking, burning with something older than her years. The soldier's breath caught. She raised her hand slowly, palm outward, a gesture of peace. The girl didn't move, didn't flinch. Then from the shadows another figure appeared, an older woman, likely the girl's mother. She pulled the child back, whispering harshly, eyes darting with fear. They vanished into the doorway, gone again. The soldier's hand dropped. Her chest ached with a pressure that had no release. She returned to her mat, but the memory stayed, those eyes, sharp with grief, sharp with judgment. And she wondered if the girl would ever see her as anything but the one who brought death to her doorstep. The sweep at dawn was worse. They moved street by street, breaking into houses already stripped bare. Families shrank against walls, hands raised, voices trembling. Miller cursed at them, demanding answers. Ray's absence made the others harder, sharper, crueler. Fear fueled anger, and anger fueled mistakes. She watched from her post, scope tracking every doorway. Her throat clenched at every child's face, every trembling mother. None of them carried weapons. None posed a threat, but the squad treated them all as suspects. When Miller shoved a man to the ground, screaming for information, her jaw tightened. When another soldier smashed a pot, scattering food into the dirt, her stomach twisted. But her silence chained her. Her role was to see, not to speak, to watch, not to intervene. Still she felt it, the fracture widening inside her. At midday, they found something. A hidden cellar beneath a crumbling house. Inside, crates, not many but enough. Weapons neatly stacked, proof. The commander's face hardened. Finally, he signaled the team to secure the area, to document, to prepare for transport. But she stayed above, watching the alleys, watching the faces of villagers gathering at the edges, their eyes filled with quiet rage. Because proof didn't erase the fear they had sown. Proof didn't erase the blood. Her scope found the girl again, peering from behind a wall. Eyes wide, fixed on the soldiers pulling weapons from her village. And then movement. A man slipping through the crowd, rifle hidden beneath his cloak. Her pulse spiked. She keyed the radio. "Contact east side, armed, moving toward you." The commander's voice snapped back. "Take him." Her finger steadied on the trigger. The scope framed his face, young, desperate, eyes wild. He was close now, too close to the squad. She had one chance. She squeezed. The crack echoed. The man dropped, rifle skittering across the dirt. The crowd screamed, scattered. Her hands shook, her chest heaved. She lowered the scope only to see the girl. The girl standing frozen in the chaos, staring at the body, at the soldier. Their eyes met again. And in them she saw not just grief this time, but something sharper, hatred. Her stomach turned. She wanted to shout, to explain, to beg the child to understand that she had no choice, that it was him or her squad. But her silence betrayed her again. The girl turned and ran, vanishing into the crowd. The soldier lowered her rifle, hands trembling uncontrollably. For the first time in years, she wanted to scream. That night the men celebrated. Proof meant success. Success meant clearance. They laughed, drank, clapped each other on the back. Even the commander allowed a rare smile. But she sat apart, alone in the shadows, staring at her hands. Hands that had pressed against Ray's blood. Hands that had pulled the trigger on a desperate man. Hands that had been seen, truly seen, by a child who would never forgive her. And for the first time, the silence that had always shielded her felt like a curse. Because silence meant she had no voice. And without a voice, she couldn't explain, couldn't defend, couldn't heal. The fracture inside her widened into a chasm. She didn't know how much longer she could hold it together. How long could silence hold before it cracked? She sat on the rooftop again, rifle cradled against her chest, eyes on the horizon. The sun bled orange across the sky, but the beauty meant nothing here. It was just another marker of time. Another day survived. Another day lost. Down below, the squad argued. Their voices carried easily through the thin walls, sharp and bitter. Ray's was gone, and the gap he left was more than tactical. It was personal. Miller's voice cut through first. "I don't care what command says. These people all know where the weapons come from. They're hiding it. They're feeding them intel. And we're the idiots babysitting dirt huts while they play both sides." Another soldier grunted. "You think the girl knew?" "Of course she knew," Miller spat the words. "You saw her face. Don't pretend she's innocent." Her stomach clenched at that. From above she froze, breath caught in her throat. The commander's voice finally broke the argument. Calm, controlled, but heavy. "Enough. We're not here to debate guilt. We're here to finish the sweep. Stay sharp. Don't let anger cloud your sight." But his words fell hollow. She knew it, he knew it, everyone did. The squad was fracturing. And she was part of it. That night she dreamed of Rays. Not the Rays who joked in the chow line or the Rays who hummed old songs on patrol, but the Rays she couldn't save. In the dream, his blood soaked her hands again. He looked at her, lips moving, whispering words she couldn't hear. She leaned closer, desperate to catch them. But before she could, his eyes clouded. His face slackened and he was gone. She woke gasping, hand over her mouth. The silent scream caught in her throat. Her silence was no longer protection. It was prison. The following morning they moved again. This time deeper into the maze of alleys where satellite maps blurred and GPS stuttered. It was a place maps couldn't explain, only lived memory could. And the villagers lived with memory. She saw it in their faces. Eyes downcast, lips pressed tight, bodies shrinking away from soldiers' boots. Every doorway felt like judgment, every silence heavier than her own. As they moved, she caught glimpses of the girl again, always at the edge, always watching. It was as if the child was haunting her. But was she even real anymore? Or just guilt walking on two small legs? At midday, Miller snapped. They'd cornered a man near the well. He was older, beard streaked with gray, hands shaking as he tried to speak. The interpreter stumbled, couldn't keep up. His words stuttered. Miller shoved the man against the stones. "Where are they? Where are the rest of the weapons?" The man shook his head, words tumbling too fast. Miller raised his rifle. "He knows, look at him, he knows." Her scope framed the scene from above. Her heart thudded, palms slick against the trigger. The commander barked, "Stand down." But Miller didn't move. She could see it, his finger curling, breath held, rage blinding. She knew what was about to happen. And for the first time in years, she spoke. "Don't." The word was barely more than a whisper, but it sliced through the moment like steel. Miller froze. His head snapped upward, searching rooftops until his eyes landed on her. Shock rippled across his face. He had never heard her voice, not once. The silence afterward was heavier than the word itself. Miller lowered his rifle slowly, muttering curses, but the old man was spared. The commander's eyes met hers, not gratitude, not anger, just something unreadable, heavy with knowing. She broke her own code. The shield of silence was cracked. That night, the men whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. She spoke. First time. Ever. The words passed like smoke through the camp, curling around her, suffocating. Some looked at her with curiosity, some with suspicion, Miller with rage. But the commander said nothing. And neither did she. Her silence returned, but it was no longer whole. Now it carried weight. It carried the memory of the single word she had dared to use. Don't. The next day, the mission twisted. They received new intel, an insurgent hideout at the edge of the village near the broken fields. The squad geared up, tension sharp in the air. As they approached, she felt it something off, too quiet, too staged. Her scope swept the rooftops, the shadows, the rubble. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. And then she saw her. The girl again, standing in the distance at the edge of the field, just standing, watching. Her heart jolted. It wasn't right. Because no child stood still in the middle of nothing, unless someone told her to. She keyed her radio. Something's wrong, don't advance. But before the commander could reply, the explosion ripped through the dirt road. The blast swallowed the front two men, fire and dust and metal tearing skyward. She was thrown back against the wall, ears ringing, world spinning. When the smoke cleared, screams filled the air. One man dead, another writhing, leg torn apart. Ambush. Gunfire erupted from the fields, from the houses, from every shadow that had seemed empty. Bullets cracked overhead, shattering stone, kicking dust into her face. She pressed against the wall, shouldered her rifle, scanned through her scope. Targets blurred in and out, muzzle flashes cutting the haze. But her hands trembled. The child's face seared through her sightline. The girl had been the bait. Or maybe just the warning she couldn't decipher. Her silence cost them again. They fought through the chaos, dragging the wounded, laying down fire. The commander bellowed orders, voice raw. Miller cursed every breath, rage uncontrolled. She fired, but each shot was mechanical, detached, as if someone else held the rifle. When the last of the attackers melted into the fields, the silence that followed was unbearable. One man dead, one crippled, morale shattered. The commander's face was carved from stone. He looked at his squad, then at her. She looked away. Because in that silence between them, she knew. Her silence was no longer armor. It was poison. That night, alone on her mat, she pressed her hands over her face and finally let the tears come. Not loud, not visible, but steady. She cried only when alone. And the silence around her carried the weight of every drop. The silence that once made her strong now screamed the truth. That no matter how much she tried to stay hidden, her silence had become the loudest proof of her breaking resolve. And for the first time, she wondered if she could survive the mission at all. How many fractures can a squad endure before it breaks completely? The morning after the ambush, the camp was a graveyard of voices. No banter, no songs, no jokes, just the shuffle of boots, the rasp of Velcro, the clink of rifle magazines. Movements were precise, mechanical, like puppets pulled by strings. The soldier sat apart, cleaning her rifle with hands that wouldn't steady. She worked each piece methodically, wipe, oil, reassemble, as if order in metal might restore order inside her. But nothing fit anymore. Not the parts of the rifle, not the pieces of the squad, not the fragments of herself. Ray's was gone, another man dead, another maimed, and she had broken her silence. Miller hadn't forgiven her for it. His eyes burned whenever they met hers, as if she'd betrayed not just him but the unspoken rules of survival. She stepped outside her role. And now she was unpredictable, dangerous. The commander called the squad together. His voice was firm, steady, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "We finish what we started. There's intel of a final cache near the old factory outside the village. If we secure it, command pulls us out. We're close, but we need discipline, focus, no more mistakes." His gaze lingered on her, a fraction longer than anyone else. She felt the weight of it like a hand on her throat. Miller muttered under his breath, "No more mistakes, tell that to her." Her fists tightened, but she said nothing. Silence was all she had left. The factory was a ruin. Rusted beams jutted into the sky like bones. Walls caved inward, glass shattered, floors buckled. A perfect hiding place for weapons, or for something worse. The squad fanned out, boots crunching glass, rifles raised. Dust swirled with every step. The air smelled of rust and oil and something sour, something old. She climbed a stairwell that threatened to collapse under her weight, setting up on the second floor. From here, she could cover the squad below. Her scope swept the shadows, empty, silent, but silence was never empty anymore. And then she saw her. The girl again. Standing in the doorway of the factory, her small figure framed by sunlight. No fear, no hesitation, just watching. The soldier's chest seized. "Not here, not now." She keyed her radio. "We have a civilian, entrance west side." The commander responded instantly. "Hold position. Do not engage, we'll secure." But Miller's voice cut in sharp, bitter. "That's no civilian, that's bait. We're not playing this game again." Before anyone could stop him, he moved. Rifle raised, charging toward the doorway. Her scope locked on him. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. The girl didn't move. She stood frozen, eyes locked on Miller, on the barrel of his weapon. And in that moment the soldier knew. If she stayed silent, the girl would die. Her voice tore through the radio. "Miller, stop." The single word rang out raw, louder than gunfire, sharper than command. Miller froze mid-stride, his eyes blazing up toward her perch. The squad froze too, the silence heavy as stone. The girl vanished back into the light, gone again. And the moment passed. The commander's voice broke it. "Fall back, regroup, Miller, stand down, ghost with me." Her chest heaved, pulse racing, rifle shaking in her hands. She had spoken again, twice now. The silence was broken, there was no going back. Later, when the squad rested inside the ruined factory, Miller confronted her. His face was inches from hers, spit flying with each word. "You think you're some kind of savior. You think one word makes you better than the rest of us. You don't get to play God, not with me, not with that kid, not with anyone." She didn't move, didn't blink. But her silence wasn't submission, not anymore. It was defiance. The commander stepped between them, shoving Miller back. "Enough, both of you. We're here to finish a mission, not tear each other apart." But the damage was done. The fracture was now a canyon. And she knew, if Miller ever got the chance, he wouldn't hesitate to turn his rifle on her. That night sleep was impossible. She sat against a crumbling wall, rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the shadows. And then she heard it. A sound so faint it might have been imagined, a scuff of stone, a breath of air. She rose silently, moving toward it. And there she was again. The girl. This time inside the factory. She stood in the corner, half hidden, eyes wide, hands clutching something small against her chest. The soldier froze. Slowly she raised her hand, palm open. No weapon, no threat. The girl didn't run, didn't hide. She stepped closer enough for the soldier to see what she carried. A small cloth, stained, torn. She held it out with trembling fingers. The soldier took it, unfolded it. Her breath caught. It was Ray's patch, his name stitched in worn thread, blood staining the edges. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, cloth pressed to her chest. The girl watched, silent. No accusation this time, no hatred, just something softer, something human. The soldier's throat ached with words she couldn't say. Apologies, promises, pleas, but all that came was silence. And somehow the girl understood. She stepped back into the shadows and was gone, leaving only the patch, only the weight of it, only the proof that silence could carry more than pain. It could carry memory too. At dawn, the squad prepared for their final push deeper into the factory. Nerves tight, rifles ready. The soldier tied Ray's patch to her gear, close to her heart. For the first time since this mission began, she felt something like resolve again. Not the brittle silence she had hidden behind, but a silence that meant endurance, witness, memory. And she knew, whatever happened next, she could not stay voiceless anymore. Because silence, left unbroken, had cost too much already. What would silence cost in the end? Her life, the squad, or something deeper? The factory loomed larger at dawn, its broken skeleton etched against the pale sky. The squad moved in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't discipline but exhaustion. They were shadows of themselves now, leaner, harsher, half-broken. The soldier walked with Ray's patch tied against her vest. It was light as cloth but heavy as stone. Every step reminded her of it. Every breath reminded her that someone had carried it back to her hands, that the girl had returned it, that nothing they did here went unseen. The commander led them into the heart of the ruin. Steel beams twisted upward, graffiti scrawled across the walls, oil drums scattered like forgotten bones. The air smelled of rust and fire and something deeper, like the past itself was burning. The plan was simple: clear the factory, secure whatever was hidden here, extract, end it. But nothing was simple anymore. Her scope swept corners, shadows, broken stairwells. No movement, no sound. Too quiet. Her chest tightened, every instinct screamed trap. And then movement, figures emerging from the dark, rifles raised, shouts tearing the air. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into steel, sparks exploding, dust clouds rising. The squad dove for cover, returning fire, voices raw with curses and commands. She dropped behind a crumbling wall, shouldered her rifle, sighted targets. Every shot precise, clean, mechanical. Bodies dropped in the haze, but more came. Miller's voice roared through the chaos. They knew we were coming. Someone tipped them off. His eyes found hers across the firestorm, accusing, burning. She shook her head, breath ragged, but he didn't believe. Not anymore. The fight dragged long, brutal. Grenades shook the ground, echoing through steel. The commander bellowed orders, dragging men back, regrouping. And then she saw her. The girl again. Standing in the far corner of the factory, clutching the wall, eyes wide with terror. Too close to the crossfire, too close to live. Her heart seized, she keyed her radio. Civilian, north corner, hold fire. But Miller snarled back. No, not again, that's bait, that's another trap. His rifle swung toward the child. Her scope locked on him, her finger tightened on the trigger. The world slowed to a single decision. If she stayed silent, Miller would fire. The girl would die, and her silence would be blood again. If she spoke, if she acted, she would betray one of her own. But this time, the silence shattered before the choice did. Her voice tore through the chaos, raw, ragged, final. Stand down, Miller, she's not bait. But he didn't listen, his finger tightened. Her shot came first. The crack split the air, louder than the rest, louder than the war itself. Miller dropped, rifle clattering to the ground, eyes wide in shock. His body slumped into the dust, lifeless. The factory went quiet for a heartbeat, a silence heavier than any before. The squad stared at her, at Miller, at what she had done. But she didn't flinch, didn't lower her rifle. Her voice carried again, firm, unshaken. "We protect, we don't murder children." The words hung like stone in the smoke. The commander's face hardened, but he nodded once. Not approval, not forgiveness, just recognition. The fight resumed, the squad pushing harder, faster, fury in their blood. With Miller gone, the chaos thinned, the resistance crumbled. One by one, the attackers fell back, vanishing into the ruin, into the fields beyond. And then it was over. The factory lay silent. The girl was gone. They secured the last cache, boxes of weapons enough to arm another war. The commander called it in, his voice steady but hollow. The mission was complete. But nothing felt like victory. The squad moved out, their boots dragging, their eyes avoiding hers. They carried their dead, their wounded, their silence. She walked last, Ray's patch still tied to her chest, Miller's blood still on her hands. Extraction came at sunset. The helicopter churned the air, dust spiraling upward as the squad loaded in. The roar drowned out everything but thought. She climbed aboard, found her seat, rifle across her lap. The others sat stiff, eyes forward, lips sealed. The commander sat across from her, gaze locked on hers. Neither spoke. There were no words left. Only silence. But this silence was different now. Not armor, not prison, not poison. This silence was truth. Proof of what they had done, proof of what they had lost, proof of what she had chosen. She leaned back, eyes closing as the helicopter lifted into the sky. The wind roared, the ground dropped away, the village shrinking below. And in her mind she saw the girl one last time, standing in sunlight, watching, always watching. The soldier's chest ached, not with regret, not with pride, with something harder to name. Resolve. Because the child would remember, the village would remember, and she would remember too. Silence doesn't erase. Silence records. And hers had recorded everything. When they landed, when the mission was debriefed, when the reports were written and the medals discussed, she said nothing. She stood in the shadows as always. But her silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was weight. It was witness. It was proof of the cost. And when she was finally alone, sitting on her bunk, Ray's patch in her hand, she let the tears fall again. Quiet, steady, hidden. She cried only when alone. But her silence would carry further than her voice ever could. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when the world forgets the mission, forgets the names, forgets the battles lost and won, her silence will remain. Not as absence, but as memory, as the loudest proof of unshaken resolve.